Alrighty, so this is DevDelta. That's what I'm kind of calling the class. The reason that I called it DevDelta. Delta in programming is basically the difference between two objects. So kind of the difference between like yesterday and today. So what you knew before and what you know going forward is kind of the idea behind the name of this, just in case you were curious. All right. So we are going to be starting with the foundations of the web, and HTML is the absolute bedrock of that foundation. It stands for Hypertext Markup Language. Hypertext Markup Language is basically just a sci-fi sounding way to say a text that does special stuff. So if you have content on your web page, you can make it bold, you can make it italicized, you can make it a list of bullet points, a table of content, things like that. Using markup within this hypertext markup language. So that is what HTML stands for. And you are probably familiar with it if this looks familiar at all to you. If anybody had a MySpace page back in the day, that Nightmare Before Christmas one really speaks to me. I love it. So MySpace was dope because you could actually go in and edit your HTML and your CSS. And this was actually a big introduction that people had to web development. A lot of people got into it because of this, especially people our age, which is kind of cool. So if you've seen this, you've probably touched HTML. This is going to be, we're going to take a quick look at kind of the structure of the web, of the internet, before we dive into HTML, because I feel like it might be helpful kind of to give you a better mental model of how everything works together. And once again, this might be really low level. You know, everybody here might already know this, but I want to start at, you know, the absolute ground level if possible. So what we're going to do, I have something prepared here a little bit, is we're going to look at 3 files here. So, whoop. Here we go. Okay, can you guys see this this folder window open? Okay, great. So we have 3 files here, and I just created these. These are blank files. There's nothing special about them. You can do this on any computer. You guys can follow along if you want to. You may need to. You may have trouble with the extensions if you're trying to follow along. So just keep that in mind. But this here is a text file, index.txt. It doesn't have anything in it. If we double click on this, our computer is going to try and figure out what program this .txt extension should be opened with. And by default, it's opening with just like a text edit program. So what we can do is let's go in and we're going to rename it. And we're just going to give it an extension of .html. It's going to ask us, we're going to say yes. Okay, so as soon as we change this to HTML, if we double click on this, the computer now knows that with the HTML extension, the default way to open it is going to be in the browser. So we see that this file now gets opened by Google Chrome. There isn't anything there, so we just see an empty page. But that is kind of an interesting beginning entry point to how we are going to be creating content on the web. And this is like the very, very, very beginning base level. So to kind of show something interesting, what we're going to do is we're going to open this with VS Code, which is a code editing software that we're going to get into using a little bit later. So this is a blank file. I'm going to drop in some HTML that I had copied from before. This is very, very basic, plain HTML. There's really not anything going on here in this content. And this actually might not be the right one. Hold on. Okay, here we go. So there's not a whole lot happening here in this file either, but and we're going to go over the specifics of these different tags and all of the syntax here, so you don't need to worry about that yet. But what I just wanted to show you guys is how these pieces connect together. So we added some content into our HTML file and saved it. I'm going to go in and I'm going to do the same to this CSS file. Oh, I tried to open Safari, sorry. Okay, we're just going to add a tiny bit of styling here. CSS is where our basically the colors and the design and the way that we make something look pretty on the web comes from, and we'll go much more in depth on that later. We're just primarily right now looking at the connection between these things. And then lastly, we have JavaScript, which is one of the other 3 pillars of the web. And we're going to open up that file and add a tiny little piece of JavaScript. with the S code here. Okay, we're gonna paste that in. And this is just an alert. So it's just gonna pop up something in our browser window if this is all connected correctly. So our HTML is reaching out to our JavaScript with this line here. Like I said, don't worry about the syntax. We'll go over this later. And it is also reaching out to our CSS with this line here. So these three pieces are the three pillars of the web: is HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And now, if we go over to our browser and we have this file that was opened, and we go ahead and refresh this, we see, okay, hello there. So we see something popped up from our JavaScript. And then we see General Kenobi, and we have a blue background. So that is all coming just from these three files we just made from scratch, out of nowhere on our desktop. And we're just opening them. We're not using anything with the internet. You can see that the protocol here is file, which just means we're just opening a file with the browser. And it's coming from my computer on the desktop with the name of that HTML file. And the HTML file is then pointing out two different directions to pick up the other content. This may not seem super interesting at this point, but I wanted to show this because the internet is really the same thing on a really large scale. So I don't want you guys to I don't want you to feel confused about like where all these pieces are coming from. There's no magic. None of this stuff is particularly special. It's just a bigger, more complex version of what we're doing here with these three files on our own computer. And oh, I don't know if I showed that. That's what I was supposed to show before we went into that little fun thing. Okay, so what we just did here. So we have an example of kind of how the internet works. So we have the internet, and then those little blue cylinders there with the looks like force lightning coming out. That was a crappy drawing, but so those are representative of servers or computers. So if we think about the internet as just a bunch of other computers, a bunch of other laptops, servers, whatever, and they're all connected via, you know, wireless connections, Ethernet connections, whatever. Those are all over the world, basically. But for now, let's think about just a cluster of servers, computers that are somewhere else. Then those guys, oh, let's see, here we go. So on those computers that are living elsewhere, we have these three types of files that we just created. We have our CSS files, we have some JavaScript files, we have HTML files. There's millions and millions and millions of these files. They're all connected. Some of them are connected, some of them are completely unrelated, but the ones that need each other are connected in a similar way that we just did with our example there in our browser. And they live on that computer out there on the web. There isn't any like display, there isn't a screen for this content to be shown on because it's kind of separate from the user, as it were. But they do live there. So now, if we think about our computer connecting to the web to like get that information, basically, you know, this little purple line here that's connected out to a router, which is just a wireless connection to those other computers, to the internet. So when you go online and you pull up a web page, you're just connecting to another computer that has HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and you're pulling it down onto your machine, and it goes into your browser, and your browser interprets it the exact same way that ours just interpreted those files by double-clicking on that index.html file. It's just a longer, more drawn-out process of that same thing. So that's how we get access and how we get information from the internet onto our computers with, you know, any website really. And there are obviously more complexities with databases and how data is stored and things like that. But as far as what you see on your screen when you go to the web and browse, this is what's happening. It's just a more in-depth version of what we just showed double clicking on that file. And, you know, if I wanted to share this example that I had here, this tiny website with Nathan, for example, I could connect like a local area network with an Ethernet cord, and we could connect our computers to each other, and he could actually open this. And that's like a mini internet, basically, is that. So I just want to help with our mental model of like building that out as we go forward, just to kind of break down the idea that there's no special magic happening on any of this stuff. It's just big. It's just a lot of things going on. So once again, like I said, that might be a little low level. Everybody might already know that, but I just wanted to go over it. Okay. Do we have any questions? Anybody have any input? thoughts so far? Am I going way too slow? Is this going to take far too long?
No, so far it's good. I like it.
Cool.
You're doing good, Michael.
Thanks, Johnny. I see you're on your iPhone. You're not paying attention anymore.
Yeah, my Mac started updating, so rip.
Come on, get it. All right. Cool. So next, we're going to go ahead and dive back into some actual HTML syntax. So what we just looked at was a big broader example, and we want to kind of take that scope down. We'll focus on HTML itself for the rest of this time. So what we're going to look at now is the anatomy of an HTML tag. So here we have an example of a paragraph tag, and it has a few pieces here. And we're going to go ahead, and this should be annotated so we can kind of look at the anatomy of an HTML tag. So we have our opening tag and our closing tag. The P stands for paragraph here. And the closing tag also always has a slash. It's always bracket, and then the character that represents the tag, closing bracket. And then the closing tag is always bracket slash character, you know, P, div, whatever that is, and then the closing bracket. So those two things encompass all of the content that goes inside of our HTML element. And we'll continue learning that terminology. So speaking of content, so here, everything that we see that is kind of white text in there, this is all content inside of our tag. And part of the reason we're going through it this way is I really want to try to use terminology that will be used like in the future to talk about these different pieces of our code. And this will be the case for CSS, HTML, JavaScript. So terminology is going to be really important for how we communicate what we are writing and how we communicate code to other people. Within here, we now have an attribute inside of our opening tag, which is that green ID equals, and then the quotable line. Quotable line, that is something we came up with. That's just, it could be anything in there. In this case, it goes along with our Dumb and Dumber quote here. And then the entire thing is called an element. It's called an HTML element. This one in particular is a paragraph element, that P. There are lots of different kinds of HTML elements. And we can also do nesting with our elements. So if we look here, we see that this strong tag has an opening and a closing tag, and it is inside of this paragraph element. So this would be called a nested element because it's living inside of this P tag and this closing P tag. And then that also has its own content. So next up, what we're going to do is we are going to look at the most minimal HTML file you can have. Oh, sorry. Trying to get back over to the browser. I'm going to share this with you guys. So I'm going to drop this in Slack so we can finally have some following along stuff. I'll put this in the Web Dev 101. Okay, so if you guys got into Stack Blitz, you should be able to open up this this file to follow along here. And what we're going to do, hopefully you should see something like this. Let me know if you guys have any trouble with this. You should see kind of a white browser on the right-hand side, and then you should see your text in the center here, see your HTML. Let me know if anybody has trouble with that. Okay, so we're going to bounce back and forth here. So we're going to kind of look at the anatomy here of the most basic HTML tag. We don't need to go too much in depth with this. This is always going to be there. This is something you can kind of copy paste when you're building your HTML files in the future. So we have our initial piece, the doc type tells the browser I'm HTML. Make sure it makes sure it gets rendered correctly. That's always there, every single HTML document. It's like I said, it's one of those things you can copy and paste in every single time, or look up if you need to. Then we have our opening and closing HTML tags. HTML is the tag that's going to contain everything. And then we have an attribute on that called lang, which is sets the language that our page is in. In this case, it is English in the US. Okay, yeah, it looks like Zoom is gonna boot us, which sucks. Okay, and then we have our head tag. which contains information that doesn't get rendered to the page, but it is used by the computer to kind of like set the title element on the tab or whatever the character set is. In this case, it's, you know, A through Z, 1 through 0, whatever the numbers are. It's almost always UTF-8. This is another thing that's kind of just a boilerplate. And then we have our body tag, and this is where pretty much all of our content will live. Okay. So now that we've run through that, we can go in and kind of make some changes here and add some pieces in. So the first thing that I'll have you guys do is we're going to add a title tag. So the title tag is going to be open bracket, title, close bracket. And then we are going to do our ending tag, which is a slash, and then that same name again. And we're going to put in, let's put in School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. This will be for Colin because he's obsessed with Harry Potter memes lately. Okay, so if we look over here, we notice that we didn't see anything change, but the title tag itself actually sets what goes into the browser tab here at the top. So if we go over here and we click open in new window, it should open a new tab for you. And you should actually see what you wrote in your title tag there on the top of your tab. And that is what that title element, title HTML element does. It specifically sets what goes in the tab. And if, like we had mentioned before, so anything inside of this head element is basically information for the computer. It's not going to be rendered onto the screen within the browser itself. So now let's see, if we go in here and we put a p tag, and let's go ahead and we'll use our big gulps example.
Michael, can I pause you for a second?
Yeah, what's up, dude?
Am I meant to be following along on StackBlitz or just locally on my own VS Code?
Ideally, I mean, I guess it doesn't really matter. It's totally up to you. If you want to open that file up separately, you can. But StackBlitz is pretty easy. So okay, that is completely up to you.
Cool.
If you did click that open in a new window button, you might need to click this. It should be like open or close here on the right hand side, so that way you can see it again here. Okay. The only reason we opened it up so we could see the what was in the tab there. So cool. Yeah, whatever you prefer. StackBlitz is just nice and fast.
All right, we'll do.
Okay, so we'll add some content in here into this p tag, and as we add it in there, we see that it gets rendered to our page over here, but we don't have those p elements there because this is the markup that is interpreted by the browser, so it isn't actually displayed. It just helps us format our content. So this here is our content specifically, and that's what gets spit out onto the page. Now, let's say we wanted to make this bold, like in our other example. There's a tag called strong that we can add here, just for the big gulps, since that's a brand name. And it is going to be opening bracket, the name of the tag, the title of the tag. And then for the ending tag, we'll do a slash and end that tag. And we can see that that actually changed the format of what gets output here on the right-hand side. One of the other things, so I know we had talked about nesting before, so we have a nested element in here inside of our p tag. And I know you guys might be thinking, like, where are these tags coming from? Are we just kind of making these up? Do we have to memorize these? And not really. There's a little bit of both. There are some tags that you'll kind of over time just get really familiar with, and you'll know what to use and when you need to use it. But if you forget, or you're curious to look up something and you wonder if it exists in HTML, you're going to want to use this. So MDN, Mozilla Developer Networks, this is the best coding, like, documentation for programming on the web there possibly is. And I think I may have shared this in Slack already, but this page here is going to list basically every single HTML element that there is. And if you scroll all the way through, it looks like a lot, but I'd say 50% of these are very rare, rarely used at all. So it doesn't come down to that many tags that you would need to know about or know that even, kind of exists, even if you forget the syntax a little bit. But this is kind of your homepage for figuring out the syntax for all of these HTML elements and what you can do with them. And if you click into them, you can always get, a full page full of a lot more detail and information on it. So I do encourage you to use this as a reference if possible. Oh, thanks, Martin. And thank you, Colin. Oh, interesting. I did not run into that. Thanks for putting that in there, Martin. Appreciate it. Okay. Cool. Just wanted to put that out there for you guys. That will be coming up in a sec. Okay. So another really common thing people are going to want to do on the web is they're going to want to add lists of things, whether they're ordered lists or unordered lists. And there is an HTML element for that. It is a UL, which stands for unordered list, or a LI, or the LI is the list item that goes inside of it, or OL, which is an ordered list. So let's try both of those out here. And we'll do an OL, which is going to be for ordered list. And then, oh boy, something is going incredibly slow here, sorry. We're going to do a closing tag for our ordered list. And we can copy and paste these guys because we probably want multiple list items inside of our ordered list. So let's do a few of these. Oof, this is dragging. Sorry, I don't know why my browser is super lagging behind. Doesn't completely bog down my computer again. If it does, I'll stop it. But okay. All right, Nathan is going to read us through his code. So this is actually really good practice just to try to use as much terminology as you can. And then we could just kind of work on, how we talk about the code we write. So that's a helpful thing.
Crap. Terminology. Okay. So most of this, I just copied what you had set up in the template.
Perfect.
So this whole thing is the element, is that right? Or each piece is an element?
Those are both true. So lines 2 through 26.
Yes.
So actually, this is kind of cool too. So if you just click on HTML, you see how it highlighted line 26 as well, automatically. Do you guys see that?
Mm-hmm.
So that is what that does is that is automatically going to highlight your opening and your closing tag. If there is a closing tag associated with what I highlighted or where your cursor is, it will show you that. So this is the whole HTML element with nested elements inside of it.
Okay. Okay, great. So it's HTML. We're saying that the language is in Great Britain, so the whole thing has to be spoken with a British accent, but otherwise
Exactly.
It's the same.
Exactly.
I don't know what the head means because you were about to explain that, and then you had me start explaining, and I just copied what you had.
Perfect, no worries. So it's a tag. So I mean,
Yeah.
for the sake of just kind of learning at the very beginning here. So this is a tag, the opening closing bracket, and then this is an element. From beginning to end is the element, the head element, and then this is just the tag. The head, for now, you guys don't need to worry about it. It basically just holds information for the browser, for the computer. It doesn't get rendered to the page. It's just for the computer. So like the title, I'll let you keep going then.
Okay, so I'm guessing then, like the title, is that if we opened it in a new window, that would be, yep, at the little top of the tab, it has the title of the page. So that would say School of Witchcraft and Wizardry.
Yep.
And then the closing tag for the title, and then closing tag for the head. Then the body of the actual page, I broke it up by paragraphs. So in the paragraph, we have a subtag for strong, for asking the question, is Colin cooler than the rest of us? And then I closed that paragraph and I opened another paragraph, so it was a new line, but I think there's probably another tag I don't remember that can do that. However, I didn't make that strong, so it just says let's see normal, and then it is an unordered list, and so each of the next lines is a bullet instead of a number. And so I point out that he lives in Scotland, but he still doesn't have a Scottish accent, which is kind of weak. But he's also getting to drink beer, which ups it. And then the Yo Mama is the wild card. So then I close the list, and then a new paragraph, and make results strong so that we all notice. And I feel like when we add up all those lists, he is, and again, subtag, he is not cooler than the rest of us. Close the paragraph, close the body, close the whole HTML kit and caboodle.
I love it. Awesome. Good work. Gold star for Nathan.
I didn't realize that you could just hover over any of the tags in Stack Blitz, and it just gives you a definition of what they all do.
Yeah, it's really nice. So this is something we'll look at as we go later on, but Stack Blitz is built on top of VS Code, which is an application we're going to use for our like development as we continue on. But this is like a browserified version of it. So this will kind of help us get familiar with some of the things we can do with this tool before we have to get it all configured and whatnot. So it gets us off the ground nice and quickly. But yes, Nathan, good job. That's awesome. Yeah, I would say the main things is like, remember the terminology for what an attribute is. So like this right here, charset UTF-8, this is an attribute. If it has an equal sign, if it's inside of a tag and it has an equal sign and then an opening quote, closing quote, that's an attribute. So that's the charset attribute inside of the meta tag. And then, that a whole thing is called an element. Those are the main things I would just say right now is good to remember. Is what the tag is, what an element is, what the attributes are. And that'll just, we'll learn those more and more as time goes on. But yeah, that's awesome. Good work, man. The only other things I was going to add to this is a couple of things. Let's make Yo Mama special here. So the anchor tag or the A tag is a really, really, really commonly used tag. So what this does, and you see this all over the internet, is this is a hyperlink, or this creates a way to click out to like, another web page or whatever. If you see the blue text with an underline, that's exactly what we're going to do here. So Yo Mama is going to turn into an anchor tag. And this has a attribute of href, which stands for hypertext reference. That's just some jargon that just means where's it going to link out to. So we're going to make this go to google.com. And then we're going to have another attribute. There's always spaces between the tag. So this is the A tag, space, attribute, href, space. And then you can have as many attributes as you want as long as they're valid. So we're going to do another attribute here. And this guy is going to be, we'll do a class. And we'll call it mother. Colin's mother. Okay. Alrighty. And we see over here, if you take a look at that, Yo Mama now has some default styling that happens when we put an A tag on it, which is the blue, and the underline, which is, everybody knows that's a link. That's kind of just common communication now on the web. And then if we click on this, I'm going to do the new tab so we don't ruin this, but okay, so the base, it tried to take us to our base URL /google.com. So to fix that, we could actually just do the HTTPS at the beginning. So that way it knows what the base is. Now, if we click on it, we should be taken to google.com. So that is how links work. And this A tag is often called it is an A element, an anchor element, but it's usually just called a link tag to do that. So that's something super commonly used. You can use these to link to parts within that same page. You can link to documents. You can link to other URLs, all kinds of stuff. So this is a really, really commonly used one you're going to see all over the place. We went over the ordered lists and unordered lists. That's a very common one. And the only other one I'm going to talk about here is a header tag. So inside of our body, let's do a header tag. And just to give you guys a quick pointer, something that's a little bit faster that VS Code and Stack Blitz will do. If you just type whatever you want your tag name to be, in this case, we want to do an H1. You can type that and just press tab, and it will give you your opening and closing tag, which is really nice. So you don't really need to, the syntax is pretty simple, the / at the end of your closing tag. So I'd say that's a nice shortcut to use. So we're going to give this a header. So we want like a big title of what this page is. And this is the Colin conundrum, really, basically. Okay, and we see that the H1, what's up?
Just had to bring me into this. And my
Nathan brought you into this. I brought your mother into it.
All right. Well, next time we're bringing Nathan's mom into this.
Okay, perfect. I love it.
Donna Landry is a saint.
Indeed.
My mom's kind of a saint.
Saint Donna. That'll be the next one. Okay, so in here, we really got off of the whole Hogwarts train, but I like this better anyway. So our H1 tag, calling conundrum, we look at that and we say, okay, I guess the H1 tag just makes the text bigger and blacker and darker, but it also, one of the most important pieces of what it does is not only does it style the text larger, but it kind of denotes what the page is about, what this HTML page we are on is about. You only ever want to have one H1 tag on your page because it helps with SEO, which is the search engine optimization, which is basically how far down the list when you Google Colin Bull, this page, this web page would show up, because it looks at the header tags and the title and a bunch of different pieces of information. That's all kind of complicated, but having a good H1 tag that's descriptive of what that page is really important for that. And it's also really, really important for people who use screen readers or they don't navigate the web the way that we would visually. And that is something we're going to go to later. That's going to be a big piece of this as well. So that's the H1 tag. There are also they go all the way through H6, and they basically just are. That's if you have like subheaders, or you're in Microsoft Word and you have you have your main section and then you have a few little extra pieces underneath there. So it helps you break out your content and kind of organize things. So H1, H2, H3, H4, H5, and H6 are all those valid header tags. And you only ever want to have one H1 tag on one given HTML page. Okay, cool. Did anybody have any questions or any problems with running this on their side, or did they add anything, or they wanted to add something else, something fun?
I was wondering, you mentioned something about the H1 or like those tags working for like SEO. Can you kind of explain that again? Like, how does that help?
So,
or how are those related?
So SEO, basically search engine optimization, really what it boils down to is if you want your web page to show up earlier in the results on Google, then you primarily want it to be structured very well. You want to follow the standards of the web that have been laid out by the people who created HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. And they write, there's a lot of different standards and specifics of like, what is the best way to do things, which you'll hear referred to as the best practice. So the closer to best practice, as far as how you write your code that your website gets, the better it'll have of a chance of showing up higher in the search rankings. So by using one single H1 tag instead of multiple ones, because let's say you said, oh, I want all these words to be really big. I'm just going to use a bunch of H1s because it makes it big and it makes it bold. By doing that, you are taking away the meaning of what the H1 tag exists for, which is to communicate a heading. So if you're not using it the way that it's intended to be used, then basically Google says, okay, well, your website sucks, so I'm not going to put it higher up on the list, because there's better websites that follow the standards that will be better to navigate and browse. Does that kind of answer your question, Sean?
100%. That's
Cool.
really interesting, actually. Thank you.
Yeah. And Colin, or not Colin, Martin and Colin, or J-Rod, are senior people here. If any of that is incorrect, or if I'm missing anything, holler, let me know.
I didn't even know that, but that's great.
Martin,
All
I was gonna add was like jargon, and like that's like search engines, like that's like what they like index files. So like when something is like published to the web, a lot of browsers have like a way, that's like the way they index it is what they call it. But Michael said it in a lot more of like an elegant way. But yeah, there's just standards like what Michael said. Yeah, you nailed it.
Cool. And that's a complex thing. That's a whole deal. That's like a whole career. So I definitely don't know a whole ton about it, but yeah, just doing things the right way, following the best practices, that is going to pan out for you in the long run, which is great. Okay, cool beans. Next up, if we look at this page, we see that we're definitely missing something that almost every web page has, and that is media, images, primarily memes, things like that. Colin wants memes on his page, I'm sure. So we're going to look at the image tag. What the image tag looks like is we have our opening tag, and it is img. And go ahead and follow along with this if you can. And one thing that's interesting to note about this is the image tag does not have a closing tag. And the way to know that, or the way to learn that, is just kind of by looking it up, and just, you know, just experience with using it. So the image tag doesn't have a closing tag because an opening and a closing tag exist to enclose content. Like, the reason that there's a beginning and an end is because there's something in the middle. With an image tag, there isn't anything in the middle because we're going to give it all of its information within the attributes itself. So that's part of the reason. If you put a closing tag on this, it'll actually technically render to the page, but it's not valid HTML in the way that it's supposed to be written. So we're going to go ahead and remove that guy. And if you ever forget, or if you notice that something's broken and it's not showing up the way you want, just remember to go to your MDN HTML elements reference, and, you know, I would just Command F image and say, okay, where's our image tag? Probably going to be img. There we go. So then we can just look at this. Oh, Deckard, thank you for that. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Give me this chicken. Okay. So this is where you would, if you have questions, always come to MDN. They're your answer. They have all the answers. Whoop. Oh, jumping ahead there. Okay. So within our image tag, there's one attribute that it needs, a required attribute. And as you look these up and learn more about HTML tags, sometimes they have required attributes and sometimes they have optional attributes. For example, class is always an optional attribute. So if we went to class and call this, you know, fun picture, then that is a target. That's basically giving it a name to say, okay, now we have a very specific way we can target this with our CSS later on if we wanted to. So we're going to give it a class of that, but the required class that image element needs is source, and that is src. And then we're going to give it an equal sign and the quote, which is our syntax for an attribute. So within this attribute, we're going to say, let's see, let's give it. Okay, we're gonna roll with this Nickelback joke because I think it's funny. Nickelback photograph. So go online, find a picture of anything you guys think is funny or not funny or that you like, or a Facebook picture of somebody else that's embarrassing. Doesn't really matter. And you're gonna right click on the image and copy the image address. And because this is basically the address of where that image lives on the web. So copy the image address and go back over to your deal. And we're gonna put it in the source. So by doing this, we are saying, you know, this is the HTML element that is an image. So we're communicating to the browser, hey, I want to pull an image in, and it's going to say, okay, cool, where is it going to come from? And then we say source. That's the source is where we tell it it's coming from. So what our web page is doing is saying it's going it's printing all this text out onto the page, and it hits that image tag, and it says, okay, cool. It just went out to the web. It requested this asset, which is this picture. So it went to this URL, and it grabbed it, and it pulled it into our web page. So then we got to use that image on our web page. It looks like absolute garbage because it's way too big. So we could style that with CSS, but we can actually do a quick little cheaty thing that is a allowed attribute on the image element, which is width or height. But we'll do width. We'll say the width is going to be 400 pixels. That might be a little small. Let's do 500 pixels. Okay, so we can kind of change how that's laid out. So you guys can follow along with that, pull in any picture you want. See if you can get it to display on the page there for you. Anybody having problems with that or any questions about this image element?
Every time I look at that, it makes me laugh.
I know. Me too, man. Me too.
I do not understand that reference, but
oh, you haven't heard this song?
Photograph song.
no, I don't. Which song is it?
Look at this photograph.
Okay, yes, I just haven't.
Makes me laugh.
Okay,
You know?
I got you.
Look at this graph.
Yeah, look at this graph. Oh man, that one kills me.
Great singing, guys.
I've been sitting here like looking at this picture a bunch of some of these examples, just chuckling to myself occasionally because it's great. So So any questions? Everybody okay with that? Everybody who wants to follow along, are we good?
Would it be a no-no to like edit the width and like height within the image tag, or would you want to do that in a CSS page? Or is that getting too far ahead?
No, it's not too far ahead. That's fine. So you can do it here. You can do it in the HTML, but generally, obviously these tools and these languages, they give you a lot of leeway. So you can do a lot of things with them, even if you're technically not supposed to. So sometimes it depends on the team or the people you talk to. But I think personally that HTML is your structure. It's your skeleton of the web. It gives you your content. It gives you the order that things are going to be laid out. It's the very, very foundation of everything. But its primary focus is structure. And the content. It's not about style. It's not about the way it looks or like the colors that things are or the width or the heights that they are. So for example, if we want to use an H1 tag, you want to use the H1 tag because it is the heading of the page, not because you want it to be big or bold. So if you want your heading to be a really thin, like railway font that has like, a bunch of spacing between the letters, and maybe it's even really small technically because of some design decision you made. And a P tag would get you closer to the way that would look on the page. You still want to use an H1 and then make it look how you want with the CSS, which is what that language exists for. The reason you want to use an H1 for that is because it is the heading of that page. That is what it means. That's its meaning. So with the image here, if you were changing the size of everything on your page with CSS, if you had a bunch of boxes and you made, I want this box to be super wide, this box to be super tall, they're all different colors, and you were doing all of that in your CSS like you would, it might be kind of confusing for somebody else who's working on this to come in and say, okay, there's a bunch of boxes, I need to change them in the CSS. And then they're like, okay, I need to change this picture of Chad Kroger. And they're like, well, I'm having a hard time changing the width of it for some reason. That would be because you did it in the HTML. So that's what's called a separation of concerns. And this is getting ahead a little bit, sorry. So this is a rabbit hole here, but basically you want the language you're working with to do what its initial job was. HTML's job is structure and content. The width and height of something.
Leave the style and the prettiness and stuff to CSS and don't worry about that within HTML.
Absolutely, if possible. The only reason I'm doing it here is because I don't want to convolute the examples with CSS since we're just looking at HTML. Does that make sense?
Yep, thank you.
Cool. Alrighty, so we have an image pulled in here, and that's awesome. Cool, fun picture. This guy's name is Chad Kroger. Let's put that in there. Cool. Okay, so this is how you pull images in. There is also a video tag. There is an audio tag, and you can find those within the HTML reference on MDN. So if you want to do something with HTML, you can probably find it and look it up and figure out the best way to do it. Okay. Alrighty. How's everybody doing on time? Are we? Does anybody have any pressing things that are coming up?
I probably got to like 10:30, I think.
Okay. Cool. Cool. I don't want to overdo it with everybody's brain. So one thing that I wanted to note here at this point for everybody is that there's a lot of terminology, a lot of syntax, a lot of different specific things, and you think like, how could I ever memorize all of this crap to be able to write this code in the future? Like I'm never going to remember all of these hundreds or however many HTML tags there are, and what exactly they do, how many attributes to put in there, blah blah blah. It seems kind of impossible. It seems like a Herculean task to actually remember these things. But one thing to keep in mind, and I was telling Kyra this the other day, is that when you're programming and when you're learning to program, this is not about memorization. Like being a programmer has nothing to do with how much you just remembered syntactically in your brain. It's not about what you're like, oh, well, I know exactly, what to type here because I remembered what the attributes are because I did flashcards on memorizing every HTML element. That's not what being a programmer or a developer is about. What we're doing here is we're developing an understanding of the tools that we can use to create what we want to create. And we're developing a way of thinking, and we're kind of, learning about the tools we can use to create what we want in this mindset that we're developing over time. So if you're like, oh, I want to put a picture on my web page here, and I want it to be after this piece, but you forgot the syntax, that doesn't matter. That's okay. Just look it up. And use the correct syntax, use the right attributes, do it the right way. Kyra, if you're saying, I think you're muted if you're trying to talk to us, or maybe you weren't talking to us. Okay, I don't think she was talking to us. So yeah, I just wanted to make note of that though, that, you know, don't get overwhelmed with what you're trying to memorize here, or don't try to memorize anything really. Just learn it as it comes. Things will, you know, they'll stick in your brain if you use them a lot. But mostly we're just learning about it. We're creating a new way of thinking in a new context of creating stuff. So just a quick note. Okay, the next piece we're going to look at here is web accessibility. Raise your hand, do that little thumbs up emoji if you've heard of web accessibility, or just raise your hand. Colin keeps doing the thumbs up emoji. I like it. It's fun. Okay, a few peeps. So web accessibility is basically the idea that the web is for everyone. So when we're creating websites, if you were a blind person and you came to thecolinconundrum.com and you were trying to look at this picture, you would be using a tool called a screen reader. And a screen reader is basically, instead of a monitor that has pixels and how we as sighted people interact with the web, if you were a blind person, you came to this website and you navigated this, you would use a screen reader, which is basically like your browser or a way to navigate your computer without any visual cues. So it's all audio, it's all auditory, and they use a keyboard, or sometimes a Braille keyboard, which is this really cool like 6-button thing that like they can use super fast. There's a lot of cool tools. There's single button inputs for people with low mobility. There's a lot of cool things out there, but primarily we'll talk about screen readers today. But that's a tool that's going to go in and it'll read every single thing on the page. It'll read all of these tabs out loud, and then they can click into them using some keyboard commands, and then it will go into the browser and it will say, okay, you know, we are on a page called Conundrum. And then we'll go in and it'll say H1. The heading of this is calling Conundrum, that's one of the most important reasons we want to be using those H1 tags and those header tags correctly. So they'll say, okay, I have some context for what this web page is about. And then they'll go into the page and it'll read them all of the P tags and all of the unordered and ordered lists. And then it'll go down to the image. And right now, if we came to this image, what we would see, and I don't know if you guys have the lesson plan pulled up, there's an example of it here. But what you would get is basically unlabeled image. That's what they would hear. They would just hear unlabeled image, and they would have no way of knowing what's inside of that image tag. So to fix that, to have a user who's using a screen reader be able to understand what's on our page and have a full understanding of the context of everything, we're going to use an alt attribute. The alt attribute basically stands for alternative text. And what this does is this will provide content for the screen reader to tell those people what is in this image, to tell our blind users what it is. So we're going to say a picture of Chad Kroger of Nickelback holding up a picture for you to look at. Okay, so now when our users come in here, our blind users or screen reader users come in here and they navigate to this, it will automatically say, you know, it'll say, first of all, let's say we're on this text line, it'll say result, he is not cooler than the rest of us, in a computery voice. And then it'll go on to the next, it'll say image, a picture of Chad Kroger of Nickelback holding up a picture for you to look at. And they'll have context for what's happening in the page. And this is super, super important. And I know that a lot of people think, you know, okay, how many blind people are going to come to my website? You know, like, do I really need to do this? Does this matter? You know, maybe a couple people are going to come out of every, 100 or 1,000. And the point is that we don't want to exclude anyone from what we're doing here. This is super, super, super important. Like, creating websites that are usable by all people is absolutely imperative in web development. And it's something that we should learn from the very beginning. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to do this course, is because that's something no one teaches from the very beginning. And it's not hard. It's not particularly difficult. It is difficult once you've learned everything and you're 10 years down the road, and then you have to start, backtracking to these beginner steps to learn how to implement this stuff again. So it's best to learn it now. It is incredibly important. The percentage of users that are completely blind is pretty low, but there's a lot of people who use screen readers that have low vision, or they have cataracts, or they're just older and they have to zoom in super far on your page. And there's that number grows. That gets a lot larger when you're looking at the full group of people that might be using a screen reader on your page. There's people who have problems with their eyes where they get these like vibrations in their eyes that blur things. They have motion sensitivity to animations on your page that can make them sick. There's a lot of people, and when you start pulling all these groups together, you notice that the pool of accessibility, people who are going to use accessibility options, grows very large, and it's really, really important to do this. Another note that I would say on accessibility really quick before, it's kind of an aside as far as the screen reader piece goes, but is internet speed. The average internet speed in Yemen is 0.38 megabits per second, which is abysmally slow. If you imagine browsing the web at 0.38 megabits per second, you're gonna have a hard time downloading even an image. Only text is gonna load quickly. So one of the pieces of web accessibility is if you are creating an unperformant website, you are ostracizing a huge group of people from developing countries that have just, on average, incredibly low internet speeds. So by developing for only people in the United States with iPhones, you're really, really leaving out a massive group of people. And that's a piece of web accessibility too. So when you think about accessibility, it's not just people in wheelchairs, blind people, things like that, people who have Parkinson's or low mobility. It's about anybody who needs access to the web. That's what it is. So I just wanted to, that's my soapbox spiel on accessibility. It's incredibly important, and we're gonna learn it, and it's gonna be fun, and it's awesome. So that's that little deal. Does anybody have any questions about that, or any questions or anything they want to talk about on that front? Okie dokie. Cool. All right. So who is on Linux right now? Raise your hand if you're on Linux. Okay. Some people don't have their cameras on. You're halfway on Linux?
Yeah, I'm running that WSL thing.
Oh, okay, cool. So what I wanted to have everybody do right now is we're gonna fire up a screen reader. And if you guys have this page open, go ahead and, whether or not it's this page or the example page, go ahead and click the open in new window. So we have it just in a plain browser like this. And J-Rod, I'm not certain. I think there's a separate application for screen reading on Ubuntu. So we're gonna have to look at that later, and I can probably help you with that. But I don't know the commands off the top of my head for Ubuntu screen.
It all have to be through command line, so I'd have to look.
Okay. There is a tool. I forgot what the name of it was. I'll Slack you and let you know. But for now, everybody who's on Mac,
it's
go ahead
Orca.
And press, yeah, Orca. That's what it was. Yeah, thanks, Sean. Okay, so if you're on Orca and you know those commands, whatever they are, that's similar to these guys. But everybody on Mac, go ahead and hit Command F5. And if you're on a laptop, you're going to want to do, oh, hold on. Did you guys hear that? Did you guys hear that Bananas like robot voice come through for a second?
No.
Okay. All right. That's okay. It has